video I want to talk about dry fire practice in the sense of learning to pull your trigger correctly without moving the gun. Now, the important part is the last part, without moving the gun. So, basically, first thing I want to talk about is what are we doing when we're pulling a trigger at any point? Well, number one, we're doing a very unnatural thing that our body was not actually designed to do, and that's basically separating out this finger and basically requiring all the rest of these other 4 fingers, if you have all your fingers, some people don't, but the rest of your fingers other than your trigger finger have to stay still or in constant tension and not move while this one is moving and bearing a load, i.e. the trigger weight. So this is a very unnatural thing, and it's simple on paper. Just keep tension and, pull the trigger. It's simple, right? But it's just not easy because you're dealing with tendons, ligaments, joints, but whatever. You're basically trying to retrain your body to do something that wasn't actually, I don't want to say designed, as if we're like Frankenstein's monster or whatever, but basically the way our bodies are laid out, it's not really conducive to the way our body's laid out. That's why it's such a challenge, because we're doing something that is physically and heck, even mentally challenging, because we're trying to micromanage our bodies and say, no, don't do what you want to do. And that's basically work all together. So if you do something like this, you'll see that you get a little bit of sympathetic movement. Obviously these are loose, these aren't holding on to something, but I can actually demonstrate. See, distance and weight, and even together, they can be your worst enemy. So I'm gonna go ahead and get behind the camera with this pistol, and I'm just gonna go ahead and have a loose grip, and I'm going to pull the trigger fast on double action and then on single action. And then we'll get into the trigger pull practice. So anyways, this is just for demonstration so we all understand what's happening when we're pulling a trigger and why this is something that needs to be practiced a lot. So you can see the front sight there. I'm holding the grip pretty loose and pulling the trigger now. Now. So it's really not moving all that much. Now I'll go ahead and engage a lot. I was holding it loose. You get a little bit of movement, but not all that much. But yeah, most of this is just from being behind the camera a lot. So if I go with my fingers straighten off the trigger, and then I go to my trigger pull, it's jumping a bit from contact with the trigger, and then basically these fingers wanting to play catch up, and it's jumping around. This is something that can throw off your shot by a good amount. And then on single action, same thing. So I wasn't able to display the perfect, jerking all around because I practice these things a lot. I practice pulling the trigger without moving the gun. It's not perfect. I mean, obviously I was wobbling around, but I was basically holding the pistol kind of like this, loosely, and trying to keep it perfectly aligned on camera. So when you're concentrating on one thing, it's hard to physically concentrate on another. Whatever. But anyways, basically, what I did there was kind of a demonstration of one of the methods that I like to practice, and that is basically calling your shot from, it could be double action if you have like a revolver, or a double action single action. This is a good thing to practice. Basically having your finger straighten off the trigger, kind of like you see like with officers that have to pull their guns on people. They draw their guns and they hold them on there, and they're ready to basically shoot, but their finger is straightened off the trigger still. And then if they have to shoot, boom. And I actually did have a good amount of movement on that one. So you see it jerked off. That's from the wrist not being fully flexed. And I'm just relaxing right now, just for a loose demonstration, I guess you could say. But basically, you're trying to keep this thing as still as possible, and then pull the trigger as fast as you can from here. And that's not easy to do. You're going to see dipping. but you want to do it over and over again and concentrate on making sure that it does not move. If you want to slow down a little bit, then fine, but I would recommend, trying to go as fast as you can, but without moving the gun. That's obviously the goal. Going really fast without any movement. That's one of the things. That's basically what I call the reaction shot. You can do that in single action too. Finger straighten off the trigger. And the reason I call it the reaction shot is, think about it, like police are reacting to movement that is hostile. Their guns are ready, and then they're reacting to a hostile act. So I call that practicing a reaction shot. So that's a good skill to have, and that'll teach your body it'll teach your finger to be able to deliver a lot of power really quick and a lot of quick movement without recruiting these fingers to help. So the next one is the draw shot, what I call the draw shot. Now for striker or double action, it's all the same. Basically what this is I would say that this is not necessarily timed, but you want to keep it under a second. Basically where you can have your finger on the trigger, and this is really good to practice on double action because this can help you get more used to doing that double action pull, and it's not going to be so daunting, and it can help your trigger finger strength. So basically you have your finger on the trigger, and all you're doing is you're dry firing in double action and doing that over and over, and your finger is making contact with the trigger, and you're just doing a smooth trigger pull. Pulling the trigger as fast as you can without moving the gun. So it should be nice and smooth, just like this. And you can even do this on single action. And that's basically the draw shot. You're trying to keep it nice and smooth. You're not trying to rush it, and you shouldn't really be doing that. I see a lot of people do that from the draw with striker fired guns, and you can't really help that because the weight is not really the enemy, it's the distance of the pull, because you're going to register distance, you're not really necessarily going to register weight. Now of course if it has zero weight at all, yeah it can, but you're going to recognize distance, you're going to recognize this gross movement, this wide movement right here, before you actually notice the resistance, the weight, up to a point, of course. And so that's what I call the draw shot, or basically it's somewhat timed. You can actually time it and see if you can get it down to being a shorter overall time. And then the last one is what I would call the open trigger pull, or the extreme precision trigger pull. This is the one people love to practice. I see people wanting to practice this the most. Even when they're drawing or they're trying to do things fast, they will touch the trigger and then they'll pull it as slow as possible, trying to prevent any movement whatsoever. That's great. And basically they take all the time in the world. They're not actually putting themselves under a time constraint, and they just start gradually putting on pressure, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you practice only that, you're only going to be able to do that at the range. Range time is your confirmation. In my opinion, you take your live ammunition and you practice, or not practice, you confirm that your dry fire practice is where it's supposed to be. And also it kind of helps you with your dry fire practice. Live fire can help you with your dry fire practice by basically telling you, what you need to work on as far as your grip, is, stuff like that. So it's basically verifying whether or not you're on track with your dry fire practice. So you can do this last trigger pull all you want, but realize that this is good for distance shooting, like long distance shooting, and punching little tiny holes, the size of mouse crap inside of a paper target. But the practicality behind it is kind of narrow for the most part, unless you're shooting at a great distance and stuff like that. But even then, I would want to have my exposure time limited, so I would probably still be timing myself at distance, and I typically do. this is the thing that I actually practice the least, is this patient, you know, the trigger will surprise me, and it's the one I practice the least. It's my least favorite because I have found very little use for that kind of trigger pull in a practical sense. Typically, if I'm going to pull my gun, I'm going to want to get the situation taken care of as quick as possible, not whenever the trigger wants to get done with it. So, with all that said, that's the 3 different types of trigger pulls that I would practice. So to go over that again, you've got the draw shot, where basically you're in a time constraint, where you basically are like, okay, within a second, I want to go ahead and pull the trigger without moving the gun. You have contact on the trigger, and this works with striker fire triggers, but if you have a double action, single action, or just a double action revolver, it's all the same. Your finger is on the trigger, and you're just pulling the trigger without moving the gun. And that's what you're concentrating on. You're concentrating on keeping that gun motionless. And if you want to up the ante, go ahead and put as much grip as you can. Vice that thing down. That's what you should be doing to control the recoil. You should, this hand should not be cosmetic, and I'll make another video of this. But anyways, make sure that you're not halting and, you know, staging throughout. You're not doing this and then gradually pulling. No, it's one solid motion. It should basically be a blur, just like this. So once you start pulling the trigger, it should go all the way back. We're not saying yank it back, but have a nice fluid motion. So that's the draw shot. The next one would be sort of the now shot. Fingers straighten off the trigger, and the draw shot, practice it, you know, double action or single action. It doesn't matter if you have like this pistol, the Beretta, or any double action, single action. So anyways, the now shot is basically fingers straighten off the trigger, aimed in, pulling the trigger with as fast as you can without moving the gun. So basically the reaction shot, now shot, whatever. So you're wanting the gun to go off now, 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 now. And if you want to, time it to see if you're actually getting your reaction time down, if you're reacting to the shot timer going off and actually able to get that shot to ignite. And if you really want to up the ante, get something like the G-Sight laser trainer. So whenever you're dry firing, you get a laser that shoots out, and you can see where you're impacting. And probably what you're going to see, like I saw on mine, I saw just my sights doing it, is it was dragging low and left. So that's typically sympathetic movement coming. So if I really vice this gun down and I do this, now, I get no movement other than a little bit of shaking because I had too much caffeine this morning. But anyways, that is the reaction shot and the now shot. That's a very handy one. Puts a lot of power into the trigger finger, and you really have to get a good solid grip on all fingers, including the pinky. Every single finger, you need to confirm that all of them, even the support hand, is vicing and holding these down and crunching these fingers down and making sure that they're not moving. You have to do that while you're doing that to prevent any kind of sympathetic movement for the most part, until you get more skill and your body gets used to having this finger working independently. And then of course, the last one that I am not a fan of is basically this slow shooting or whatever. This is what a lot of people do with double action triggers. You see them doing and they gradually put pressure on the trigger, and to me it's just really annoying. I don't really have the patience that a lot of other people do. Like, they're putting an ounce of weight on the trigger at a time, like they really focus on it. That's basically what this is. You're just gradually putting weight on the trigger, and you're pulling it as slow as you can until it goes off. And it's supposed to be a surprise. That's good for distance shooting, and you want to make sure there's absolutely no movement. That's good for, you know, micromanaging the movement. But realistically, I would practice this the least, unless you're just trying to play around and test yourself or whatever. I would not mainline this last one. But that's just my own opinion. So anyways, that's dry fire practice. That's the 3 different types that I practice with. Last one obviously the least, but every now and then I like to mess with my triggers and just see where they're at and feel the weight. I have no problem with weight on a trigger. But anyways, with all that said, I appreciate you guys watching. Go ahead and leave a comment below. How do you practice your trigger pull? I didn't include things like reset. You should be resetting under recoil, so you shouldn't even really be tracking it. So that's another discussion for another time. I know people are gonna highly disagree with me, and I don't care. But anyways, go ahead and leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.